A few random thoughts from the Geezer. If this is your first time checking out the Gig Geezer, if you're a returning visitor of the Gig Geezer, thanks for coming by. And if you would not mind, hit that subscribe button, give my content a thumbs up, share my content among others, and I definitely welcome your comments in the section below. I'm certain that some of y'all noticed that I'm doing this segment of the Gig Geezer without my customary hat, which is right here, but I'm also showing my latest fro modification. Now, the reason why I'm leading off with the fro modification, because me and going to the barbershop has never really been a favorite of mine, going all the way back to my childhood. Now, I'm from a generation whereby if you didn't come back with some haircut, my mother would have marched me right back down the street to the barber and would have told him to just cut it all off. And that would have been a very bad day and week. In fact, I remember one time after getting a haircut, I remember praying that my hair would have grown back the next morning. Of course, it didn't. And when I was coming along, kids grew out their hair. They got blowouts. They grew out their hair. They combed it out. They didn't go around getting their hair cut low cut low as they do now. So I guess I formed a bit of rebellion against the thought of going to the barbershop. I only went when I had to. In fact, I went only because I just absolutely positively had to this time. If you ask me when was the last time I'd gone to the barbershop, you'll probably have to look back in some segment of the Gig Geezer to find out when was the last time I last did a segment without a hat and my hair about this length. So the funny thing about going this time is that in recent times that I'd gone, my barber had told me how prices are going up. And I remember the first time we spoke, I'd been giving him like $20, $25. He's like, well, you know, man, the reason why I hadn't been telling you what the real price is because you've been a customer of mine for a long time. And besides, I cut you a break because you only show up every now and then. I think the last time I'd gone there, I may have paid $40. But this time, I come in with a 50. And the reason why I came in with a 50 because my queen had told me, well, that's pretty much what everybody's paying these days, 40, 50 on up, depending on what you're looking to have done. Well, I don't have anybody to mess. I don't allow anybody to mess with my sideburns and beard. So the only thing that they're doing is modifying this fro. So when I showed up with a 50, my barber made an event out of it. He took that 50, broke out with the phone, took a picture of it. He smiled and had a couple other smart aleck things to say. But I was also there to take care of some other business with him. And so I guess it was all good. Now I'm wondering if I'll be paying $50 next time I show up, whenever that is, every now and then, once in a blue moon. I don't know. Well, the next thing I wanted to bring up is about the departures of a couple of food apps. Now, this is not April Fool's Day, and I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by departures of a couple of food apps. The first one is the Waiter / Bite Squad / ASAP. They're done. As of yesterday, April 1st, 2024, they have ceased operations. In fact, they put in a filing with the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, indicating that they're looking for to file for bankruptcy. They've been losing into the tens of millions for the past several years. The company was actually formed in Lake Charles, Louisiana, so that's southwest Louisiana, or some college people, and then they moved to Lafayette, Louisiana. It seems as if Waiter / Bite Squad / ASAP was always and also ran to DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats. They were among those in that 1% or less when you look at the market share. So it's not as if anybody's really losing any sleep over Waiter / Bite Squad eating it. Personally, I always thought that they didn't pay worth a damn, and they were also notorious in their actual verbiage. And if you look back to some Gig Geezer archives, you'll see where Waiter/Bite Squad/ASAP actually had in their verbiage in the driver's section that drivers could be deactivated for a low acceptance rate. They were the only ones to do that, and I'm surprised that there was never any legal action against them just for that premise. But moving on, the other app, in terms of quietly departing from a setting, is DoorDash. There's nothing to suggest that DoorDash is going out of business anytime soon, at least in the near future. They are publicly traded. They're still looking to turn a profit, but DoorDash is still number one in the market share in the United States, commanding over 60%. Now, why am I bringing up DoorDash? I happened to notice in my news feed yesterday, April 1st, DoorDash had quietly backed out of a partnership with NASCAR in terms of being a primary sponsor for a racing team and for its marketing presence with NASCAR. DoorDash actually first appeared on the scene in 2020, and then it took on a more prominent. It first appeared on the scene in 2020 with a marketing partnership, but also it was quick to enter into a sponsorship, being a primary sponsor of the Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin racing team, the 23XI, whose main driver is Darrell Bubba Wallace. And in 2021, it became a primary sponsor to the tune of about $10 million a year. Now, in NASCAR, for a team to compete at, you would say, a championship level, it takes somewhere in a range of 25 to 35 million a year. Now, I've mentioned in many segments of the Gig Geezer about my sports reporting background, and if I were to draw upon that experience back from the mid to late 1990s, teams were talking of needing money for speed at the tune of 10 to 12 million a year, or 10 to 15 million a year. And so if you just do simple math, the cost for speed has more than doubled in NASCAR. But there's no published reason as to why DoorDash had all of a sudden, no sooner than it come onto the scene, decided to back out of its partnership with NASCAR and the Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin racing team. For a long story to make short, they came onto the scene in 2020, and by the end of 2023, they were gone. But it wasn't really talked about, at least among news sources, until this past weekend when NASCAR had made its stop at Richmond, Virginia, at the Richmond International Raceway. So, what does all that have to do with the Gig Geezer channel, at least with Waiter/Bite Squad and DoorDash? Well, Waiter/Bite Squad again was and also ran among the gig food apps. It was present in the Columbia, South Carolina market, and part of its marketing strategy was to make a presence in what they felt were underserved markets, like Columbia, or like Gainesville, Florida, or like Lake Charles, Louisiana, or Lafayette, Louisiana. But apparently that strategy didn't work. Also, under its iteration as Bite Squad, they had people who were actually working as W-2s, wearing uniforms, using a company car, and getting paid hourly, and that pay model went aside by 2020. And so it never really kept up with the DoorDashes, which became number one in the U.S. market share, taking over from where Grubhub had been number one in the market share prior to 2021. Uber Eats has always been number two for whatever reason. It's been at number two for as long as I can recall. With respect to DoorDash leaving NASCAR, it's like this. As a driver, as someone who has been in the gig economy actively since 2016, you see companies come and go. Waiter/Bite Squad/ASAP is yet another one. Earlier this year, Point Pickup was another one that fell by the wayside. And there have been other apps to have come through that I've been active on, and they're no longer present. Postmates is another one that comes to mind. So what it tells you is that a company like DoorDash, actually based on the news reports or based on the news stories, it was a win-win situation for DoorDash. DoorDash got the visibility that it was looking for with a different type of audience with NASCAR. NASCAR, through its presence, benefited from having a different demographic to come through NASCAR. One of the things about when you're a sponsor, whenever you see NASCAR, when you see that company's logo on the hood of a car, that's to the tune of upwards of $500,000 for one race. However, the other thing about when you have a presence like that, the companies are looking for teams that are ideally who are going to be running up front. Darrell Wallace was running up front. He's won 2 career races. The first one in 2021 at Talladega, and then in 2022 at Kansas Motor Speedway. He finished 10th overall in the NASCAR standings. He made it to the 16 driver playoff, and so far in 2024 he is in the top 16. After the Richmond race, he's in 14th place. He hasn't won yet. So it's been a win-win situation in that when a driver is running up front, that's more television exposure. That translates into certain, according to the algorithm, advertising dollars or advertising revenue for the companies when they see a return on their investment, but also for the teams, it translates into how much they can ask for when they're looking for another sponsor. Now, again, back to how it relates to drivers. Well, I've mentioned recently that when you're working these gig apps, you got to treat it as a business. So you have to use apps like DoorDash and the Grubhubs and the Uber Eats and the Instacarts. Use it in a way that benefits you. Use it in a way that helps you get to the next step, another level. I mentioned in 2022 how my next move was the transaction for this Sprinter/cargo van. I've mentioned throughout 2023 the development of a cash game, which is slowly developing. It hasn't developed at the rate as I've made other transactions, but it is still a work in progress. So, if anything, when you see companies come and go in whatever arena, be it from a business arena in which they come in and market and leave a market, and they go out of business altogether, or like for the sake of DoorDash, which spends $100 million a year for advertising, and so a NASCAR sponsorship partnership was a significant portion of their marketing budget. So we're saying that a sponsorship was $10 million. It was at least, it's probably safe to say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15% of their marketing budget. That's all I'm going to share for random thoughts in this segment of the Gig Geezer. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you like the content that's been provided in this segment or in any other segment, hit that subscribe button, give my content a thumbs up, share my content among others, and I definitely welcome comments in the section below. I'm Inwood Lane. As always, may your grind and may your hustle continue.